Of the three noble peoples of ancient times, the Elves are said to be the oldest. Their kind has raised great cities and woven magical works since even before the Celestians came to Mantica. Indeed, the oldest of the Elves maintain that their ancestors treated with the gods themselves, and brought them to the world to usher in a long age of peace, knowledge, and prosperity to the land. Those times are ended. The Elves now are a people in decline. Many of their ancestral lands are gone. All of the western kindred's holdings, bar the city of Therenia Adar, are lost to the sea. Most of those of the southern kindred, and a good deal of the eastern kindred's realm, is buried beneath desert sands. Still, the Elves are mighty, masters of magic beyond compare. Since the fall of the Celestians, their mages have become the greatest in the world. Whatever an elf turns his keen mind to, he masters, whether this be art, poetry, magic, science, or war. As such, their armies are disciplined, as effective individually as they are in ranks, bows and spears their favored weaponry, and regiments equipped with such are deadly indeed.
Welcome back, Mastercrafted Gaming fans. Brittany and Kyle here today to bring you an army faction analysis on Elves.
She's so professional, it kills me, because Caleb is just the big joker here. This is my wife, Brittany. She is a wonderful person. She's trying to help me in this process, and I don't know how many gamer wives are out there that could say that, but I'm pretty proud of this one. So what we're going to do is break down army factions. We're starting off with Elves. I put a blog post up that is going to show you guys exactly what I'm talking about here. I broke it down into 18 different categories that units will fit into when selecting an army. And today we're going to talk about how each of the units from the Elf army list are going to fit into those categories to help you maybe pick them if that's the army that you're looking at. It's going to help you give an idea of how they're going to perform on the battlefield and basically show you what is going to happen once you've selected your army list and put it together. What do you think?
I think that would be a great idea because today I played a game, my first
game.
Yay! I played Dwarves and you made my list for me because I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't even know what they were called other than Dwarves. I'm like, they're just Dwarves, aren't they? So this is really going to help a lot of people, I think.
You have fairly limited experience with Kings of War other than me talking about it constantly, so...
Pretty much, yeah. If it's not Night Stalkers or Dark Elves or whatever the hell they're called in Kings of War, I don't know anything.
So yeah, we're going to start off with Elves. First unit is, or first types of units are the ranged ones. Critically with the Elves, they are really, really good at stuff. They have a special rule, army-wide generally, called Elite. Elite means you get to re-roll your ones when you don't hit.
So they're like Legolas. They never miss.
She's trying so hard right now. Elves are a good faction. They can ally with other good factions and neutral factions. Can't go with evil units though, and there's a lot of evil units in Kings of War.
Yeah, that makes sense. A lot of your stuff is evil.
Everything I have is evil.
Yeah.
So, I'm a dark and brooding emo guy.
Hence that.
So, Elves basically are a faction that people like them aesthetically. If you were going to pick an army for Kings of War, it would probably be Elves. That's my assessment of you.
Definitely, yeah.
Because you like the way they look.
I do. I even have elf ears upstairs somewhere.
That's something that really... Oh, you should have worn those. Anyway, that's something that at a starting point, you're probably watching this video because you like the aesthetic of Elves or you are into Elves in other cultures or other systems or other games, whatever it is. So in Kings of War, they fit the standard of what Elves are for the most part. We're going to start talking about units. Okay, so as far as Elves go, the ranged units that we're talking about here are basically a function of placing a unit on the table and throwing shots out from their placement. They're not going to move much. Most ranged units are going to suffer some kind of a penalty for moving, or they've got the reload special rule. These are units that are meant to be placed, pick a firing lane, and go from there. In the Elven list, there's two of those. What are they?
The Kindred Archers and the Glade Stalkers?
I gave her a cheat sheet so she knows what's going on. The Kindred Archers, I'm talking about a horde here.
Those are like the 40 people, right?
There's 40 in a horde, yes. The Horde is a big block that's going to throw out 20 shots. The Gladestalkers are ones that are just a little bit different because they're going to throw shots from terrain more beneficially. With their special rules, you can place them in a piece of terrain, a wooded area in particular, and gain a pretty significant advantage because they don't suffer a penalty for shooting out of the terrain. But if you're shooting at them, they're a little bit harder to target.
That makes sense. Trees and such, they can hide.
Now, today when you were playing with your dwarves, you had 2 regiments of iron riflemen. I don't even know what they're called. They had, how many shots? 10?
10. 10 each, yep.
Now, how much of a damage output do you think that they had?
The game we were playing today? Not much.
It wasn't much?
No.
10 shots?
Yeah.
Do you think you'd be better served with 40 shots?
Definitely.
Or 20 shots if it was a horde?
Yeah, definitely.
So, that's all we're talking about here. A purely dedicated shooting unit. The regiment was nice, but for only 10 shots, it's not as big of a threat. You might want to consider regiments if you need that staying power, though. If you expect them to be taking some damage and kind of use them as a blocker or some kind of a redirect for them. So.
No, but shooting definitely works in your favor sometimes.
She definitely enjoyed the shooting phase. So. Next type of unit that we're talking about are grinders. Grinders are units that aren't generally more defensive than other units, but they can stick around for at least 2 to 3 turns of combat, and that is really beneficial sometimes, especially when you need to hold a certain area of the battlefield, or you're trying to protect some other units that need to get to where they're going.
So like if you're going for the little marker,
we played loot today.
You want to kind of distract other units with these guys, right?
Keep them held up. And the Elves, they're not generally a defensive army. They're frail looking guys. The Mantic models are about the skinniest models I have ever seen for an elf. And that's probably on purpose. In particular, the tall spears in the Elven list are grinders. They have a special rule called Phalanx, and that is a rule that really helps stick things around. Denies Thunderous Charge when charging from the front. It's a really big deal. It kind of helps keep your guys protected, because that 4 defense, it matters when Thunderous Charge comes in and it takes it to a 3 or to a 2. All of a sudden it's much easier to get them off the board. So it's critical in their case. The next category is usually defense. Defense are the units that come paired with like big shield, 5+, 6+ defense stats. And the Elves don't have any of that. They have a couple units that can be taken as 5+ defense. I think 4 Shamblers come to mind. But that's not really what they're best used at. And what we're talking about in the context of this is what these units are best at. Everything in Kingdom of War can be used in multiple different roles, but these units are picked specifically for these roles based on what I feel that they have the best situation to succeed in. So our next category is the Jack of all trades. I think you would like these guys. They're the Sea Guard.
They have sea in their name. I like the sea.
Therenian Sea Guard? I'm not even sure that's how you say it. So they are a real multi-purpose unit. They have the ability to hit fairly easily. They have ranged weapons. They have mediocre defense. They also have Phalanx in their case. They're a real situational unit. They're not good at anything, especially without magic items. But they're not bad at anything either. You can throw them into a unit that supports another unit. You see an area on your battlefield that looks like, uh-oh, I really need to send some help over here. This is usually a really good unit to get that job done. Did you think the dwarves had anything like that today?
They had a couple things, but like I said, they're dwarves. There was this one big monstrous creature that was kind of good at close combat and things like that, but he was also good at going to get his little marker instead of just
He was a little faster
fighting.
than the rest of the dwarves.
Yeah, definitely faster. Only by 1 inch, though.
Sometimes an inch makes a difference. Next up, we have Unit Erasers. I titled them this because these are guys that are really, really offensive. They come in, swoop, and hit in 1 turn of combat, and things are done. Really, really heavy offense, high crushing strength, thunderous charge, boatloads of attacks, good melee stats. It's really, really nasty units as far as being able to take something off the board when you dictate it. Don't think the Elves have that, though, unfortunately.
Yeah, probably not. Elves don't seem like they're that offensive in their nature.
They're not really all that aggressive. They have some things that can be that way, but in this case, I don't think that they match something like a Stampede, for example.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't think so.
Do you even know what a Stampede is?
Isn't that where all the little animals run at once in the same direction?
If you're playing the herd, yes.
Okay. So the next unit we're going to talk about are harassment units. the good kind of harassment in a war game, not the bad kind. We're going to talk about the Silver Breeze Cavalry. They're very quick, very fast, can be supportive of other units. They have nimble and bows, so they can really position themselves to help anybody on the battlefield.
She did so good. Speed 10 makes a huge difference. Nimble makes a huge difference. They can move and still shoot those bow shots, even though they're a modest 7. These guys can do a tremendous amount as far as just putting those extra little wounds here and there onto units to soften them up, get them ready to go before a big combat happens. Even if it's only 2 to 3 wounds a turn, that's really going to stack up over the course of the game. I promise. I do it all the time with my Twilight Cannon, and I use a similar unit to what the Silver Breeze are. What we're also going to talk about are kindred archers in regiments and troops. This is where your shot totals go down to 8 and 10 respectively. What happens here is we have the ability to throw those tiny little shots out and again put those more wounds on there. They can be a little bit more mobile as well because with such a few number of shots, it's okay if you move and need to position. I use them all the time as roadblocks too, so these units are a pain to deal with.
I bet. Harassment always is.
Next up, we have the rapid insertion or deployment shenanigan kind of units. And these guys typically come with Vanguard. They give you a free move before the game even starts, and it kind of lets you force the issue instantly. You didn't get to see this in your game, but this is something, an example I can give you is, imagine if, remember those fiends, those real spiny looking guys, I moved them up really quick?
Yep.
Before you even could do anything. What if I got to do that twice in a row?
Wow.
That would be kind of scary, right?
That would be scary.
So it forces an issue. It makes an opponent kind of rethink what they were doing. It can also force you to show your hand a little bit early. In the case of the Elves, I'm going to give this category to Hunters of the Wild and Forest Shamblers, mainly because they both have Vanguard. Hunters of the Wild, you might be questioning that. They've got a bunch of attacks. They lack elite, but they hit fairly well on 4s. 20 and 25 attacks is a really big deal. With Vanguard, they're going to be able to force an issue with a couple of different units. You also, kind of throw out that threat bubble of like, hey, this is my charge range. With them, that's a 12-inch bubble that they could charge in the following turn, and that sort of changes how you're going to move coming forward. As far as Forest Shamblers goes, at Pathfinder, shambling slows them down a little bit, so when you have that Vanguard move, it really kind of helps get them out there. They go really well with moving through terrain. We all know that that's a very advantageous thing to have when you're playing, so it's a big deal to get that kind of issue right up there in their opponent's face right away. Next up is Charging Cavalry. Charging Cav is units, or are units, that have to get the charge in order to be successful. We've done several different strategy reports that show you how to use a cavalry unit, and if you haven't seen those, I'll put a link in the description that kind of shows you how it works. These units are ones that typically have Thunderous Charge, typically have a fairly decent amount of attacks. I think 9, 18 is what you see in troop and regiment sizes. They hit on 3s, they have really fast movement, but they don't succeed at all generally when you don't get the charge or they're hindered. So they're units that are very popular for flanking because of their speed. They're able to get down sides of units, other units, and basically get those flank and rear charges exposed. It's a very big deal, and it's something that I like to do. Caleb says lances and beeholes because I'm all about it. It's just something that gets me excited. It's a really devastating charge. I like it, but you didn't get to see too much of that because I don't have any cavalry units in my Night Stalkers.
No.
I mean, I do. They're just not the official cavalry, so not traditional horses.
They're not on horseback, trotting along.
Every time we watch Lord of the Rings and the third movie where Rohan's coming in from the side, I talk to her. It's like one of the most devastating things in any, traditional war scene. So I love it.
So, one of my favorite things in school to always talk about were the ancient Egyptians, because they got to ride around in chariots. And the elves have chariots too. Imagine that. Sorry, everybody got excited. So, war chariots, they can be patient. They can wait out their turn. They've got bows. Right?
They got bows.
Okay, they've got bows. They can be patient. They can wait for their shining moment in their flexible cav.
What we're talking about here are flexible cavalry. These are units that can do different things other than just charging like the standard cavalry options. With the chariots in particular, like she said, you can throw those shots out there early in the game and then wait for that perfect charge. Especially if people forget, they're seeing they see you shooting units across the board, and they forget that you actually have this 16-inch charge range all of a sudden with Thunder's Charge 2, and that makes a big difference. The other unit I'm going to throw in here are Dracon Riders. With the Elves, most people consider them the best unit in the army. They have Fly, they have Thunderous Charge, they've got Crushing Strength 1. They're a unit that with Speed 10, 3 up, 5 defense, and 918 attacks for a troop and regiment, you can do so much with them. I would consider them the closest thing to a unit eraser that the Elves have, but because of the Fly, because of the speed, they're a unit that forces issues and can do so much. You can go over the top, you can get an objective, you can do a real late claim of dominate or any of those scenarios that cause you to move to where you need to go at the end of the game to win it. So that to me makes them more flexible than just charging. The game is so much more about movement, positioning than it is actually just killing stuff.
But they don't have chariots.
They do.
Oh, they do?
No. These guys are like dragons or something like that. I thought you meant.
No, chariots way cooler.
Wait till you see Empire of Dust. What do you need when a unit's covered in armor?
A big scary monster!
She was able to field greater stone or earth elemental or something like that today, and I think she really enjoyed it. Just big unit was a big deal for her. I got a Shadow Hulk into the Iron Breakers or something like that, and that was really helpful. So anti-armor units are ones that come with Piercing 3, Crushing Strength 3, typically some monsters. In the case of Elves, we're talking about the Tree Herder, the hero. It's something that... was that your tree impersonation? She wants to ride an Ent.
That's how you get Ents.
Okay, so these guys are tree herders, or giant trees, things that are able to just really smash stuff underneath of them. And in the case of armor, you want to throw those up against your defensive units. Those ones with the big shield, 5 and 6 defense, those tiny kind of troops or even monsters sometimes that just can't be cracked. These guys are going to do the work to do that. They typically come with a modest amount of attacks, 7, 8, 9, 10, somewhere in that range. Pretty good melee stats, but at the same time, they're specifically made to take out armor. So that's the goal with them. Alright, so coming up next, we've got these small unit hunters. These are ones that a lot of times your opponent will use chaff, things that are designed to kind of throw you off your game plan, block you from getting where you really want to go, or redirect your movement. And they're units that you don't really want to dedicate your full force to getting rid of, and Kings of War gives you the capability to take things in certain situations to take those out fairly easily without investing a whole lot of points into them. For the Elven army list, we're talking about the King, typically mounted on a horse to get to where they need to go, and the Palace Guard. The Palace Guard are a unit that, think of them like royals guarding a castle, those guys in England and such.
Fucking with you're not getting it.
Yeah, basically like that. You love those guys.
I do.
She wants to go and meet the royal family and be a princess, so she's jealous of all of you.
I think my son would make an awesome playmate for Charlotte or George.
Okay, so what we have are units that are able to... I think about the Elven King, 5 attacks, something simple there. Palace Guard, I think, have 10 attacks, I want to say. Fairly small amount of attacks, and you think to yourself, man, this isn't really that good of a unit, but they are great at cleaning out these smaller units. They typically only have anywhere between 9 and 13 nerve, and so you put 5 points of damage on them, and all of a sudden that's a very meaningful nerve check, something that could easily get them wavered or even off the board. So you think about those small heroes, and you say, I need to round up my points, I don't really have magic items that I want to spend on them. Those are good places to do it because they're often sources of inspiring too. So that's where your kind of beat stick heroes come from. But in the Elven list, I'm talking about just these two.
What do you need when a big bad monster's beating up on your armor?
A monster hunter. In the case of Elves, they have the perfect situation for this. They have a master hunter. This guy has bows, decent melee attacks. He's got piercing 1, stealthy, individual. So he's able to kind of find that height 4 monster at a decent range, get to him very quickly, and start to put some wounds on him. I think this is a good unit for hunting monsters or even war machines in this case. Basically, just throwing enough wounds to do the damage. There are other units that could be good at this as well, but in the case of this, the Piercing 1 is probably going to break or at least force a couple of early nerf tests on a monster, and that's a big deal. That's something that makes a difference in the course of the game.
So we're really starting to get into units that are good at fighting units that we've already talked about. So that's something to keep in mind as we move forward with this video series. So the next unit we're going to talk about is artillery. When I think of artillery, especially when it comes to the elves, this unit is a bolt thrower, right? Mm-hmm. So those are the things like in Lord of the Rings that look like a giant bow that shot the bolt thrower thingy way far away into the other army. I had a couple cannons today in the dwarf army that were really good at shooting things far away, and I used them an awful lot.
How many times did you actually hit with them?
A good many. No.
The cannon, how many times did you hit with?
The cannon I hit with twice, but the other cannon I did pretty good with.
That was the organ gun.
Okay.
And in the case of elves here, we're talking about a bolt thrower in particular, and that's very similar to a cannon because it's got 2 attacks. Their ranged attack is 4, though. And then it's a little bit better than the dwarves. Now, they've also got elite, which we talked about earlier, that helps them hit a little bit better because they get to reroll those 1s when they don't hit. So it's kind of helpful in their case. They usually have really high piercing attacks. They've got incredibly long range, so they can press an issue from the start of the game. What did you find, though? You needed a pretty good line of sight in order to hit stuff.
Oh yeah, you can't have anything in the way of these things to shoot at something.
If something's behind cover, if there's intervening models, all of a sudden it becomes very difficult to hit with them. In the case of elves, this is a pretty decent advantage, and for only 90 points, it's a good unit. Second unit I'm going to throw into here is the Dragon Breath Flamer, and this was similar to yours with the organ gun. The Dragon Breath Flamer is something that is a short-ranged war engine. I see this as a really good defense against those Vanguard units that we talked about, the ones that come up really quick, very early and often. It kind of gives you a defense there, and then it also against flyers, because when flyers come and threaten your backfield, this is a short-range unit that's going to be able to protect the rears of the units that have already advanced forward a little bit. Does that make sense?
Makes sense to me.
Next up is casters. We all know that elves and magic go hand in hand, and they're units that are generally very supportive roles. For the elves, they have access to a lot of different things.
So one caster in particular is the Green Lady. I think I would really like the Green Lady. She can fly, she has really good healing power.
Heal 8.
Heal 8. I'm really into healing with my hippie voodoo oils that Kyle calls them. But I think I would really like the Green Lady.
She's got regeneration, she's got inspiring, she's a special character, so she's a little bit, rare compared to what your other options are. Heal 8 is a really pretty significant thing to have. She's able to go up and support the units that are taking some hits. Those grinders, you want them to stick around for 3 to 4 turns. You're throwing Heal 8 onto them every turn, and all of a sudden you could have the potential to heal up to 8 points of damage every turn.
Wow, that's a lot of points of damage.
That's not keeping stuff from going off the table very easily.
Yeah, not at all.
She's an individual. She stays behind stuff. She doesn't get targeted quite as easily either. So something to keep in mind if you want some more longevity in your force. Another point to that, though, is that elves aren't that good at longevity in general, so keep that in mind. They need her in this case. The general caster healer is just the Elven Mage, though. The Elven Mage is really flexible. They all come with a modest heal 3 stock. That's not that great.
No, but it's still healing.
It's still healing. You roll 3 dice, you need 4s. That's maybe 1 to 2 on average that you're going to get worth of healing. That's not that great. Where they shine, though, is that they have the ability to pick a number of different spells. I'm fairly sure the elves have every single option in the book. They got Fireball, Wind Blast, Lightning Bolt, Bane Chant.
Wow.
All of a sudden, they can help you in any way you see fit. This is a big advantage for elves because you can tailor this to however you've built your army, and the casters are a really critical support role in my opinion. Now we're on to unique support, and what I'm talking about here is inspiring. In today's game, you had 2 units that were inspiring, and
yes.
This is because we were borrowing Martin's army, and in Martin's army, he only has 2 inspiring units in a 2,000 point game. I think that's a little light. Some people would beg to argue, Caleb.
I loved inspiring, except for the fact that you could steal it from me.
I was playing Night Stalker, so that's something she didn't like too often, but it's something that really gets rid of those lucky rolls, and when you're building an army and putting it together, I highly recommend that you include inspiring. Some people recommend as much as 1 for every 500 points worth of army that you have.
In the Elven list, the Standard Bearer, which is pretty much stock across every single list in the game. They're generally 50 points. They provide a 6-inch inspiring bubble. It's not really anything other than that. So if you're willing to pay 50 points for that kind of support, it's a really big deal, because what happens in this case is that a unit takes points of damage, you roll in that nerf check that gets them off the board, and if I get a lucky double 6 really early in the game, when this is a big unit and you expect it to happen, you did it.
I did, yes.
You rolled 2 6s and something was going to go off the board, but I stole your inspiring.
And they stayed on till the very end.
She saw that happen, where inspiring could have taken off like a 220-point unit right at the beginning just because she rolled 2 6s, as opposed to having that inspiring and keeping them around. So big deal. Standard Bearer, and then they also have a special character, and I'm not sure I'm going to say this right, but Argus Rodinar. He's interesting. What he does is he's able to pick a single unit anywhere on the battlefield and force them to get a automatic, inspiring check. It's not an actual inspiring. He doesn't even come with inspiring. He's kind of a special placement, because what you just kind of know where things are going to go bad. He says them. I want to protect them. Being 50 points, I think he's a pretty good buy. I think it's an interesting thing because that 6-inch range doesn't apply. You can just go to wherever you need it, and that's pretty neat.
That is pretty neat, because you can generally tell when something's not going to go your way.
She knows that after one game. Disruption units. These guys are ones that basically provide as much havoc as possible. Not harassment units that can put little bits of damage on them, but disruption units are used in particular to shut down shooting, for example. In Kings of War, if you take a wound in close combat, you can't shoot in the following turn, even if it's just one point of damage. That's pretty significant. So what we're looking for are units that can get to an enemy and do that, and shut down that kind of shooting, or just kind of get in the way. Stop someone from getting the charge that they want, those sort of things. Being able to sacrifice things. And in the Elven list, I think there's actually a couple here. I'm gonna say the Noble War Chariot, the Elven King, again, the Elven Prince, and the Dracon Rider Lord. These are all units that are going to put a decent amount of damage on a shooting unit so that they can stop shooting. I don't know that I did that to you today. I don't think I had any individuals in the list that we played.
No, you didn't.
But you saw the effects of getting a charge and not being able to attack back because you took some damage. So in a dwarf army where she had lots of shots, she couldn't do it because I just put 1 point of damage. And that's a really good way to shut things down. Everyone says that shooting is really powerful in this game. Well, you throw a single model worth 100 points at a unit that's 200 points more, and it shuts them down. That's kind of crummy.
Yeah, it goes away fast.
So I think that the point investment is something that you have to consider here. It's a unit that I believe in as an army. You have to know your opponent a little bit ahead of time. If you know that you're coming up against a lot of shooting attacks, this is a good buy. It's also a good buy to help stop a flank charge from happening. I actually used it in a game that I played earlier today that wasn't with Brittany, where I made a mistake and I exposed a flank and I didn't see it until after the fact. So I had to move a disruption unit, which was the Night Stalker's Nightmares, in the way to stop that from happening. So I had to sacrifice a unit just to keep a more important unit from getting just charged, yeah. And that's what these guys do. This is it.
Monstrosities.
Last one.
Final one.
Monstrosities are those units that just nasty. Everything about them. Typically they're monsters. They're dragons.
Krakens.
Sometimes vampires. These things have breath attacks, 3+ melee spells, 5-6 defense, really high, 17-20 nerve in that range, 10 attacks usually for the most part. They don't have individual, which means they can double and treble attacks. Fly, I mean, you think that they have a rule, they got it. High crushing strength, thunderous charge even. I mean, they're just the full package. They also come with like a 300 point price tag to them, and that's a big deal. Monstrosities. I don't think I actually took anyone. You think the Terror might be a monstrosity, but that's not what the Terror's role is. In the case of our game, that was the Void Lurker. It was that little tiny guy flying around.
Oh, okay. The guy that just kind of sat back and shot.
I sat back and waited. No, not shot, but sat back and waited and then took a charge because I could fly 20 inches.
Oh, yep.
and get that charge. Remember, I got him on the side, and he had 20 attacks all of a sudden. Those guys, they can be very flexible, but they're also very devastating. They're also a massive distraction to an opponent that knows what they can do. They see them, and they know that big, juicy 300-point price tag is like, I want that. I got to get that off the board. And that can be really, really to your favor.
But to an opponent who doesn't know that price tag, they just kind of let it sit back there and be like, well, what's that guy doing?
Until they hit you in the face with them.
Yeah, then that's no fun.
So in the case of Elves, that would be the the Dragon Kindred Lord. Totally forgot to record that part. The Dragon Kindred Lord is a unit that's very similar to this. It's a little bit cheaper than some of the monstrosities can be, but it's a big deal.
So I feel like after going all of this, especially after playing a game just today, this afternoon, when it's fresh in my head, I understand a little bit better, and I could probably come up with a list. It would take me a few times to kind of get it right, and like you said, it really depends on who you're playing and the type of army that you're opposing and knowing your opponent, but I think this really helped.
So let's actually test that right now.
Oh boy.
Out of the units that we talked about, are there two that you think you like, the way that they act, or the things that we talked about? Two types.
I definitely haven't had any experience with Cavalry, because the dwarves, man, they just merge along.
He didn't have any cap.
Yeah, forget that. And I think they would be interesting, and they could be very, very helpful in a
Charging
situation.
cavalry or flexible cavalry?
Flexible, probably. I know charging is good in different situations, but I think flexible, I like flexibility when it comes to that stuff. I know, I like flexibility. That's not me at all. But I think in this case that I would like flexibility better.
What else?
I really like the guys that hide in terrain and shoot, because they're harder to hit back, and you can, like, I had good experience shooting things today, and I think that shooting would at least put some damage on something so you can kind of get to it a little bit easier later.
So, in the Elves, the biggest thing to me is that they have a ton of options and a ton of categories. We went over actually 17 today, and the Elves fit into 15 of those.
That's a lot of categories for any army.
What I did is I broke down what these categories were, and I said that they apply to every army, and not every army has all of them, but the Elves probably come the closest to fitting into everything. So they are a wide base kind of army. They've got a ton of different units, and that's where people are drawn to them. They can do just about anything and make an army to do just about anything. So if you're looking for combinations of ways to put an army together, Elves give you a lot of options. A lot of options.
And they're also pretty cool looking with their pointy ears and their bows. Can we watch Lord of the Rings?
Yeah. Again. So that's it, guys. That's the Elven review. If you'd like to see us change things up in how we do this, please let us know, because there are 19 more to come.
Oh boy.
Yeah. So this is a icebreaker kind of video, and we can improve upon this from here, so please let us know what you'd like to see. I'm not going to make Brittany do all of these with me, so she gets a break. I just thought I'd introduce her. She will be at Adepticon with me, so feel free to introduce yourself. Just don't hit on her, because I will kill you.
Oh, come here.
Thanks, guys.